When you think about design, a lot of times you are thinking about your computer and what we can do for digital design. But we really have to go back and look at some of the art styles that have really inspired not only designers and painters and artists, but the world, because art plays such a significant part in our society. Now, we're going to go over a few different styles. I'm not going to give you a huge history of them. I am not an art major, but this gives you a brief introduction to them and the style that they present. We will learn a little bit more about what goes into those styles and why they choose to place things in certain places later on in the semester. But let's have a mini art school. So again, these are art movements. They have inspired the way we look at design and really how we look at not just design on paper, but in architecture, in modern media, all sorts of things. The first one I want to look at is Impressionism. So, this one is characterized by very, very visible strokes. You can tell that it's painted. They're not trying to hide that. But they really focus on this idea of open composition, meaning that there's lots of space. They're not trying to take up most of the space with the subject. And that's okay. As you know, your book is called White Space is Not Your Enemy. And so, this is the same kind of idea. It really also focuses on light and how light can change the qualities of things or show the passing of time or show movement. And they do this by different angles, different colors and shadows. And this really helps you to see depth and different perception and perspectives. The next one we have is pointillism. And this one really, really focuses on blending color with a very specific style of brushwork. And that brushwork is tiny, tiny, tiny little dots that blend together to create a visual scene. You can almost think of it as like the little dots that you see on photos that are pixels or vector art that you use when you design. And this takes a long time and it really takes a lot of tones and different colors that come together to create this specific look. This art style is called Fauvism. Um, it is a very vivid, expressionistic look. It is very expressive, lots of color. It started in Paris in around 1900 or so, but it wasn't a long-lived um, art movement, but it did have influence on lots of other movements and artists. As you can see, it kind of looks almost like something Picasso would do. And you can see it's very harsh, lots of distinct lines and separations of the color and shapes. And again, it wasn't long lived, but it did have influence. Now we have Art Nouveau. This is really inspired by natural forms. So think like plants or flowers. They have lots of curves. They're very sensual. Um, there's asymmetry to it, so it doesn't mean that everything looks very symmetric. It doesn't have one side that matches the other. Um, this also went not only for art and painting and sketching, but we saw it in ceramics, glass, concrete, lots of open spaces. This was a very big art movement. And one of the biggest pieces that is famous for it is called The Kiss, which is up here on the right. Again, it has very unusually large forms to it, um, but it's very movement driven, and your eye is drawn to certain things because of the way the lines move. This style is a Dutch um, art movement. It's very fundamental. It has lots of shapes, very geometry heavy. Straight lines are predominant in it. And they use a lot of primary colors that play off of black and white. And it's really used to show the positive and negative elements of art and how they work with each other to create objects and subjects. Last art movement I want to talk about is Cubism. This is probably one of the stranger art movements that we've seen. Um, and really, objects are looked at, kind of broken down, and then reassembled in this very abstract way. As you can see, this is a bowl of fruit and some people playing instruments, and it maybe a house party. Um, but there's not like one single viewpoint that's depicted. There's lots of viewpoints, and they're represented in very odd shapes and forms. So that you have to look at the overall piece to get the context of it and um, put it together kind of like a puzzle. So again, this is just a short intro into some different art forms and what they kind of represent. And we will go into more of like compositional elements later in the semester. But I wanted to give you some inspiration as you're working on your different challenges and your projects, that it doesn't have to be what is necessarily in style now. It could be lots of different things put together, and you can take inspiration from these different art movements.